Puntland heads to the polls. This week, the semi-autonomous region of Somalia will vote. The new election process may be more important than the outcome as the one-person, one-vote system plays out across all districts for the first time in decades. Can the region complete its transformation from a Somali pirate sanctuary to a beacon of democracy? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Puntland. Somalia has been mired in civil war for over 3 decades. Democratic elections have repeatedly been delayed by political wrangling and security challenges. But the semi-autonomous Puntland region, which sits roughly in the middle of the country, will be holding their own municipal elections this week. The road to the one-person, one-vote poll has not been easy for President Said Abdulkadir M, nor for the opposition. At least 2 people on the election committee were removed after disagreements about government interference in the process. The Minister of Internal Affairs was also replaced. But despite that, the international community has commended the region and the Transitional Puntland Electoral Commission for overcoming the challenges. Here's a look now at what it's taken for Puntland to get to this point.
Puntland lies on the northeastern corner of Somalia, bordering the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. The region declared autonomy during the Somalia Civil War in 1999, but remained a part of the federal government. In a country marred with violence, Puntland is relatively safe and prosperous and hosts many refugees from the south. Its economy is also thriving, thanks to large oil and gas reserves. Its major port, Garad, boosts regional development and secures food supplies to the Horn of Africa. A surge in pirate raids over a decade ago has since been quelled by the UAE-funded and internationally trained Puntland Marine Police Force. Then there were attacks by the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Al-Shabaab terror group. But none of these have held Puntland back from a transition to democracy. In 2021, the state ditched an indirect electoral system that saw elderly clan members appoint a 66-seat local assembly. Instead, the people went to the polls to elect lawmakers in 3 districts. It was the region's first one-person, one-vote election in more than 50 years. That successful experiment paved the way to expand it. On Thursday, Puntland will vote for more than 3,000 candidates across 33 districts and 7 provinces. The UN mission in Somalia has commended the historic moment.
The partners believe that Puntland's experience with direct elections has the potential to inform and inspire the expansion of democracy across Somalia at all levels of government.
But it's been a long process to get here. Puntland President Said Abdulkadir M has been criticized for mismanaging previous elections, with rampant allegations of voter fraud and malpractice, and they remain a matter of concern for the upcoming polls. Opposition politicians have asked Denny to stop the vote and engage in negotiations with all parties to avoid what they call irreversible damage. They accuse the president of hatching a plot to extend his term, which is due to end next year. Despite expressing willingness to hold presidential elections with a popular vote, Denny hasn't yet set a clear path, and critics say he might assess the results of local elections and act to the advantage of his car party. Denny is also in a political rift with the government in Mogadishu. He is unhappy about the federal government's growing control over the region. Puntland has also refused to participate in the country's debt relief program. Somali Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre says Puntland will be responsible for any election failure.
It is better for people to go for free elections, but what if what's going on will lead to the destruction of Puntland? It should be done in a way that is consensus and something that is agreed upon. Otherwise, no.
Meanwhile, Denny, who also ran for Somalia's presidency last year and lost, accuses Mogadishu of undermining regional stability.
The president and his prime minister have agreed to refuse the Puntland democracy and its willingness to hold one-man, one-vote elections.
Democratic transitions are not easy. Despite all the obstacles, Puntland has managed to develop a direct election system, and if it manages to pass its biggest test yet, it might inspire not just Somalia, but also the greater region.
Well, joining me now for more perspective on the Puntland election and whether it can succeed is Jonathan Ofai Ansah. He's the publisher of Africa Briefing magazine, and he joins me now from London. Thanks so much for being with us. It's been tried before among a few districts at a time, but it's taken decades really to get this one person, one vote of this scale. 40 districts and provinces in Puntland. Why does this vote matter so much?
Well, it matters because for the people of Puntland, to assert, their independence, then to show to the whole world that it can operate or it can run its democracy, it can run its own affairs, it can, maintain a stable government in the country. So, for their own sake, and also to prove to the world, it's going to go ahead and make sure that these elections are successful.
Do you think they will be successful?
Yeah, I should think so, because look, we've had the main, Somalia, after a protracted process, they've eventually been able to establish, a new government since last year, May, and then they are going on over. So I think they are going to take a cue from what's happened in Somalia and do the same, in Puntland.
It's interesting, though, because it would seem so fundamental to, the development of democracy to have one person, one vote. But there is actually a lot of mistrust going into this because the opposition and clan elders feel that this style of voting actually gives the incumbent this unfair advantage, a chance to manipulate the election and actually avoid what would have been the normal process of sharing power with various clan elders in kind of a rotating manner. Do you think it's time for that mistrust to end and give this democratic system a chance, or is there good reason for certain people to believe that it won't work out fairly?
Well, there are good and bad reasons, but we shouldn't forget that habits, we are all human beings, we're all creatures of habits. Habits die hard. So when we are used to a certain system, a certain mode of doing things, and a new system comes in to be implemented, naturally, there's bound to be some pushback and also some mistrust. But I believe that the one-man, one vote, I think will be the best solution, because it has to break, the stranglehold the clans have, over the country.
There is an issue as well, though, with the federal government actually trying to stop these elections, even though Puntland, unlike Somaliland, wants to remain part of Greater Somalia. Why is there that conflict between Mogadishu and Puntland?
I believe, I think they are not, I believe Mogadishu sees Puntland maybe as not, playing to its rule book. Okay, and again, I think Mogadishu, we should forget that Somali, as it is, it's some sort of a federation. But I think Somalia wants to sort of exert, the central government wants to maintain and exert its authority, on all the states, Puntland included. But I think, listen, things are moving in the right direction. I believe that with some dialogue, meaningful progress could be made.
How serious is the terrorist threat now in Puntland? How much is Al-Shabaab under control? And I must mention again, it is remarkable that Puntland did manage to get the piracy issue very much under control. But is Al-Shabaab still very much a destabilizing factor in the region?
I don't know about Puntland, but I know Al-Shabaab is quite active in other parts of Somalia as a whole. But I don't know much about Al-Shabaab's activities in Puntland. But even then, the government of President Mohammed, it has gone very far, in clipping, in minimizing the influence, of Al-Shabaab. Though Al-Shabaab hits back every now and then with mobbings in Somalia and elsewhere. But on the whole, the central government is winning the war against Al-Shabaab.
As I mentioned, the economy of Puntland is doing very well, actually, thanks to certain oil and gas reserves. Do you think the regional government then will be able to manage that level of profit as it increases? Because there is the common line that actually that kind of resource wealth can prove more of a curse rather than a blessing.
It is up to the leaders, and we have this perennial problem in Africa where, well, any resource we have, more or less becomes the case. But it will be up to the leaders themselves to manage the resources well, to better the lives of the citizens. One cannot say from London from it that they will do this or they will do that, but it is up to. But judging from other stories, other scenarios in Africa, one hopes that the leaders in Puntland, the incoming government or whoever is there now, would manage the resources well and make sure the citizens, benefit adequately from the resources.
Okay. I mean, finally, if this vote is carried out, peacefully, how likely is it that the model itself will be followed in the rest of Somalia and in the greater region and in Africa?
If it's successful, I mean, you're talking about the elections, moving away from the clan system. Already, we're moving away from the clan system, to a one-man, one vote. If it is successful, I believe that with time, over time, it will be replicated across the whole of Somalia.
Okay.
That's what I believe.
Well, that's good to hear. Jonathan, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Newsmakers. So can and will this election succeed? Joining me now to debate that are, from Rabat, Abdiaziz Abdirahman. He is the former commissioner of the Somalia Federal Election Implementation Team. And from Washington, D.C., Hodan Isse, assistant professor emeritus at the State University of New York at Buffalo and former First Lady of the Puntland state of Somalia. Thanks both so much for being with us. Abdiaziz, I'll start with you. I mean, how do you expect this vote to go? Will the results be accepted, and will there be ultimately some kind of peaceful transition?
Thank you for the platform and the opportunity to talk to the TRT, and also I thank Dr. Pan on the side of Washington, D.C., who is actually a very important person when it comes to the Somali side. I believe the coming election in Puntland, that is a local country.
Okay, we're having a lot of trouble with Abdiaziz's line.
Let me take.
Abdiaziz, we're going to try to correct your connection and we'll come back to you. Let me ask Hodan Isse, just to explain what your expectations are for Thursday's vote.
My expectation is, number one, I just want to say that I'm very happy that this process of one person, one vote, which have the principle of equal representation, that advocates for political equality. I am hopeful. I can't predict the future with perfect foresight, but I'm hopeful that it will be peaceful. As you know, all elections are problematic and controversial. And at times, as we know from the US election, it could be sometimes violent. But I think from what I see now and what I gather, based on what's going on, yes, there was some problems, but I think I am hopeful that on the 25th, for the first time in Somalia, which is going to be a real pilot model that all Somalis will look and be proud of, there might be, and I say there might be, as I said, I don't have the perfect foresight for what's going to happen in the future, but I'm hopeful. And I think that most of the kinks have been straightened up, and there might be will be election on the 25th, where people have to vote for their own needs and wants, and the government will say something. Yeah,
it is really. It's just good to hear a sense of optimism because, I mean, it's so basic to some outsiders that one person, one vote just sounds like a basic kind of pillar of democracy. But in Puntland, there seems to be a lot of mistrust. The opposition seems to feel that it gives the incumbent this chance to manipulate the system and really just keep a grip on power rather than allow for what they would like to see as the fair rotation of these clan elders and the sharing of power among various clans by taking turns, basically. So is their mistrust misplaced, or is it legitimate in the context of Puntland and the clans?
I think mistrust is a very common to a country that has gone through the pain of civil war and internal displacement and not having really a proper government. So that is that's a given. Two, Somalis are very traumatized. And of course, there hasn't been any election that's based on one person, or people didn't have a say of what their wants or what their services they wanted to be delivered. Most of the issues that you see now is those who have power competing over what sort of model that can be used. With the current government have more power to sway the election on their way. Yes, there's always a mistrust among elections, any elections, whether it's a fully grown country like the US or Puntland, which is really trying the first model of one person, one vote for Somalia.
Okay.
So I think that you are expected some mistrust, and there is some, of course, but I think the ball is on the government side, where democratic leadership is crucial to democratic governance. And this process, to be successful, will be the legacy of the current president and his government. So there has been some problems, but I think Puntland has have resolved some of the most problems, at least for 25th election, and the rest will be probably kicked out or will be resolved in the future. So I do think that it probably will happen, and if there is any fallout, that can be resolved through the clan leaders or
fair
the proper.
If you can just better explain then, whether these clans and clan elders who really do mistrust the system actually do want to see one person, one vote. Because there have been those who say that this system particularly it benefits women in many ways. And that's why, in large part, they'd like to see it carried through. But still, there's the clan elders are very powerful. This has been the core of the system for decades. Do they want to see this transition?
Well, the clan elders, I believe they've done their job during the time when their representation and oversight was needed. We have to grow out of that system, and we have to find a system where there is a political equality and a principle of equal representation. Of course, clan leaders have to respond to the needs of the men. There is no youth and women were underrepresented in that process, whatever the reason is. So we cannot be stuck. The fact that clan leaders were allocating political resources based on 4.5, whatever it is that's been deemed necessary, it was a necessary process at the time. But we cannot be stuck with an inferior process. We need to move on where equal representation for all citizens are there, but whether they women or especially women and youth. Women are the bedrock of Somali society wherever they are, in every state, in every region. And even though they are there to help the family, they have been missing in the political power sharing. So hopefully this time, the vote is on their hand. I have nothing but respect for the clan leaders, but the time is over. I have a respect for the 66 Puntland parliamentarians who chose presidents for the past 24 years. That time is over.
Okay.
And I will expect some drawbacks and mishaps in this process, because it's the first time. When a new baby is born, you expect things to be not to be perfect. It's going to be a lot of growing pains. Nonetheless, we need the government to make the process somewhat accountable and fair, and make sure even those who are opposing the process feel comfortable about how the process is undertaken. So
okay,
yes,
when
it will be a controversial. It will be controversial. It will be problematic, given the Somali history and the lack of strong institutions. Even though they have institutions, relatively have a better institutions, is still Somalia is in the process of recovery from prolonged war and lack of institution.
And at this point, people want to see, fair and equal representation in this election. But the truth is, as far as the numbers are concerned, only about 400,000 people have registered to vote, which is actually a fraction of those who are eligible. And some actually say that's due just to a basic lack of awareness about this election, how to register, how to participate, how to exercise your democratic rights. So can this election truly be free and fair?
I don't think there's no perfect free or fair election, to be very frank, in anywhere in the world. But I'm not saying it's not perfect. I'm not saying it's without a problem. I'm not saying it's without a controversial. To me, as a person, as a woman, from Somalia who've seen the plight of people lacking their voice, not representing their needs, no service delivery. The government have no power. Even if 10% of them can vote based on the rest of the population. And it's a pilot model. The last election for the federal government was a mayhem. Only few, over less than 300 something parliamentarians were actually deciding based for the whole country, and Puntland is no different either. 66 parliamentarians that involved in all sorts of problems will decide, and it never passes. The service never reaches to the people who are supposed to be served or governed. So even if it's a fraction of the population who are able to say something, and also who can choose among the alternative, there are at least some choices here. It's not only one single party. That yes, they are limited to me, but still there is some choice. And if these 400,000 people can spoke their choice, and there is some sort of an accountability, I think it's better than the 66. All I'm saying is,
it's a process, it's a model pilot.
It might represent the needs and the wants of the people. Again,
understood.
It will advocate the principle of equal representation, equal political equality. The governed will have a power, and they might have a choice among the
understood. I'm going to try to give Abdulaziz one last chance to participate. Hopefully we'll have your connection corrected. Go ahead. We have our last couple minutes I'd like to give to you.
In the election cabinet, the pre-election has been done, and also the election day is going to. But the question is, what will be happening after the post of the local council elections? If there will be challenges, the mechanisms are not ready. Those are the questions that can be raised. In three things are very important in this election: the consultation of the stakeholders to be on board, and also the government of Deni. The time is very short, but this is
Okay, Abdulaziz, unfortunately, your connection just isn't strong enough, so we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank both of my panelists so much for being with us on this edition of the Newsmakers, our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.